When Americans think of German cities, they might imagine something like this. Picturesque historic quarters, quaint half-timbered houses, cozy cobblestone streets, and towering church spires rising above medieval town squares. And in some places, that postcard vibe still exists. But today, German cities usually look like this. Ugly doesn't even begin to describe it. These places feel flat-out hostile, uniform, anonymous, and overwhelmingly gray. So, what happened? The short answer is bombs and cars, in that order. The more complex explanation involves an economy left in ruins, a housing crisis of unimaginable scale, competing visions for a better future, and the most quintessentially German concept of all, bureaucracy. Back in the days of the German Empire, this is what cities looked like. Fancy facades, intricate decorations, and tons of stucco. Up until World War I, architects tried to bring back styles from eras long gone, but still romanticized. Experts explain this as a sort of nostalgic escapism. With the rise of industrialization, noisy factories and smoky mines began to dominate the outskirts of bleak and polluted cities. In response, urban planners designed whimsical, richly ornamented homes as a kind of fantasy retreat from the gritty grind of daily life. Then, in the aftermath of World War I, a radically new idea emerges. In 1919, architect Walter Gropius founds the Bauhaus School in Weimar, an avant-garde university blending crafts and fine arts. A little over 100 years ago, the world's first Bauhaus building is constructed. A prototype for modern living meant to showcase just how innovative and revolutionary Bauhaus ideas could be. The Haus am Horn is something completely new at the time. A minimalist, cube-shaped domestic house with a super functional layout designed for efficiency and convenience. The sample building sparks significant dissent. Some people openly mock it, calling it everything from a Martian house and a polar station to a public restroom. Others celebrate the concept. After all, Bauhaus is about more than just minimalist aesthetics. It's practical. With the deprivations of World War I in mind, Bauhaus embraces new and efficient building methods. The concept goes on to achieve widespread success, gaining international acclaim. Experts say Bauhaus completely shifted the way we think about architecture. It introduced sleek materials like steel and glass, along with smooth and minimalist concrete walls. The Nazis, however, have no love for Bauhaus architecture. Subtle and functional is not exactly Hitler's style. The Führer wants classical pomp and historic grandeur, monumental buildings that scream power and control. So when Hitler takes power in 1933, he dissolves the Bauhaus. Its members scatter across the globe to the US, Switzerland, France, and the UK. Then a few years later, the Nazis invade Poland and France. After World War II, great historic cities like Munich, Hamburg, or Hanover are left in ruins. That leads to an unprecedented housing crisis with millions displaced and homeless. To make matters worse, the population explodes. People are fleeing the devastated territories that Germany lost in the east, heading west. The economy starts kicking off, drawing masses to the cities. With new prosperity, the baby boom kicks in. Germany has a serious housing problem. By the 1950s, the country is short around 5.5 million apartments. And so begins a massive construction boom. Cities have amazing histories. Take, for example, Berlin's Roaring '20s. Say you have a talent for graphic design and capture some of that history in your work. Your friends love your stuff and want to buy some prints. Maybe it's time to professionalize. That's where Shopify comes in. Shopify lets you build your own online store in minutes so you can get your art out there fast. Whether you're selling posters, a coffee table book, or postcards, with just a few clicks you'll have a fully customized professional store. No coding needed. With Shopify Magic, you can use AI to generate smooth images and layouts, helping you sell your vision across platforms like Instagram, YouTube, and Pinterest. And the dashboard lets you monitor all the key metrics of your shop performance. We've been using Shopify for our clothing brand Culture for years, and it's honestly been a game changer. Once you have a physical store for all your products, Shopify offers a point-of-sale solution as well. So, if you are ready to start building your business or improve the one you already have, visit shopify.com/fern for a free trial. So what should post-World War II Germany look like? Two sides clash. One advocates for an exact reconstruction that would restore German cities to their historic pre-war splendor. Take Munich, whose beautiful old town attracts millions of international tourists. Many of those historic buildings were completely rebuilt and restored one-to-one in the 50s and 60s. The other side demands the exact opposite. German cities should leave the past behind and prepare for the future. Overhauled and modernized. Enough with the quaint and charming. Forget everything grand and pompous that could evoke memories of the traumatic Nazi era. Bring on the cars and planes. The future is built with steel and concrete. The flagship city here is Hanover. It is one of the first places to embrace this new path and become a city intentionally designed for cars. The overhaul transforms the city. Roads become wide, roofs flat, and buildings modern. Historic landmarks are torn down to make way for new residential zones and an extensive highway system. The miracle of Hanover, as German media calls it, becomes a blueprint for many other cities. Bauhaus makes a comeback as well. In the 1960s, many German cities pushed for large-scale housing estates to tackle the still imminent apartment shortage. One of the most famous ones is built in Berlin in the 1960s and dubbed Gropiusstadt, after Bauhaus founder Walter Gropius. Gropius has a noble vision, a satellite city of light and space, a modern housing complex of 5-story buildings surrounded by parks and gardens. Simple, efficient, and beautiful. Affordable, high-quality living for everyone. A model for the future of sustainable urban development. But things don't go as planned. The housing crisis forces developers to stretch the buildings up to 30 stories. The parks and gardens almost completely disappear. The promise of a better life never materializes. The project primarily attracts tenants from lower economic classes. What was meant to become a future urban haven instead turns into a stark symbol of social struggle, massive, bleak, and utterly alienating. So while some German cities continue to attract tourists with their comforting old world charm, many have turned into The concept of Angstraum describes literally a space of fear, particularly referring to urban infrastructure. If you live in a larger US city, you're probably used to this. You're walking around late at night, maybe close to a train station, and suddenly you have to go down one of those sketchy-looking underpasses. No one is around, just long corridors and shadowy corners you can't quite see past. Something about it just feels off. German cities are filled with these spaces as well. As they were redesigned around the automobile, pedestrians got the short end of the stick. Again, car dependence may sound familiar if you're living in the US. Today, in many German cities, you need to take long underground passages to cross extensive motorways. Streetlights are not helping much either, as they're mainly doing what their name suggests, illuminating roads and highways, leaving pedestrian zones in near darkness. German cities have historically had pretty solid public transportation, and yet cars take up a ridiculous amount of space. In Berlin, 15% of the city's entire surface is exclusively dedicated to car traffic. In 2020, the German capital went for a temporary experiment. It gave one of its most central streets a car-free makeover, with wooden benches, trees, and a dedicated bike lane. The experiment lasted for 3 years, until Berlin elected a new conservative mayor who scrapped the project. In other countries, cities are making bolder moves against car dependence. We live in Amsterdam, and there are not just one but two bigger channels constantly gassing the place up for its infrastructure projects, to the point it's a bit excessive perhaps, don't know. Barcelona is combining regular city blocks into so-called superblocks. They are restricting car access and reclaiming space for public areas, parks, and playgrounds. The idea is inspiring. German cities like Cologne and Berlin itself are considering similar concepts. More light, more greenery, less traffic. Sounds like a pretty simple recipe that could massively benefit German cities. Any city, really. Which begs the question, why can't we have both affordable and beautiful cities? Can't we do modern without creating miserable concrete deserts? In Germany, a key obstacle is excessive, complex bureaucracy. The construction industry faces rampant regulation, fire safety, noise protection, energy efficiency, and a laundry list of other building codes. Every German state has its own laws covering everything from parking space dimensions to stair width. In total, there are about 3,700 construction norms across the country. Many of them stifle creativity and exacerbate costs that have to be cut somewhere else, which often means that architects and developers need to fall back on drab designs and cheap materials like steel and concrete. Many architects we spoke to are criticizing this vicious cycle. They say it has led to standardized procedures devoid of any real connection to organic urban design and the actual needs of people. The ever-increasing use of glass is another issue. Not only do glass facades look cold and uninviting, they're also terrible for the environment, trapping heat inside and reflecting it back onto the streets. To be fair, beauty is a tricky subject to debate. In this video, we used the word ugly to describe a sense of alienation and an overall inhuman touch. In the 50s and 60s, it was far more important that people had homes, not how they looked. And a lot of grand buildings of old simply didn't exist anymore. Today, modern buildings are generally much more energy efficient, which is crucial in the context of global warming. Aesthetics must be a consideration, but not the only one. However, taking all that into account, in our view, German urban planning could benefit from a significant shift towards greener, more human-centric spaces.